curing me. Yeah, and I wanna run like the blood from a wound to a place you can't see me. 'Cause love, like a blow to the head, has left me stunned, and I'm reeling. Yeah, I'm reeling. And if you go,
What happens? Sweet shit! Get off of me! We got something up ahead. Damn it. Road's blocked. Now we gotta deal with this.
Team Om Nom. Alright, so let me give you some feedback on these different components of performance. Your team paper, presentations, team assessment, and I'll answer some questions that I received about your final project. And I hope that these remarks are useful, but definitely talk to me during class this week if you have more questions. Alright, so let me take a look at your paper to get started. This is the scene in Walking Dead that is full of surprises, this little segment here. Okay, paper, here it is. Let me go back and look at your paper. We have, I think your paper didn't have a title. So I'd like to encourage you all right off the bat to make sure you give us a title for your paper. And it could be that, because I downloaded them from Moodle, if you had a title page, it didn't upload. But I don't think there's a title in the PDF that I have. You want to use the title as a chance to get your argument out there from the very beginning, right? Your title should be creative and playful, and it should also convey, if possible, the sort of gist of your argument. So that's one thing, but definitely this paper about V for Vendetta, what I see as the argument, comes pretty early on, and it stays steady throughout. And this is in the end of the first paragraph. You guys write, instead of a dystopia where there is a revolt against authority that inevitably fails, V's ability to change within the characters leaves us with a notion of hope and possibility of a better future for our characters. So I take this to mean, and you say this earlier in the intro paragraph, that V is a catalyst for hope. And then in this case, the graphic novel is different from other dystopian texts because it is not about the transformation of the central protagonist. It is really about the kind of transformation that he can usher in or encourage in other characters. So that's definitely the argument, and it is supported throughout with capable close readings. Rhetorically, this is on the second page, you all write to kind of make this transition. But what is the function of writing a dystopian text? And more importantly, how does V for Vendetta relate to it? And then you go on and use the Bakalini and the Moyen to argue, make this point about the critical dystopias. Good use of Alan Moore throughout, right? You all are sort of checking in and using Alan Moore's intention as evidence in establishing this argument. As English majors, you all are just doing a capable job of using textual evidence and analysis throughout. Your parenthetical page citations are appropriately done. Your close readings are appropriately done. There are a few stylistic things that I would point out. Well, first of all, before I do that, let me say that toward the end, and this is page 8, going into page 9, you write in a close examination of a panel. In this panel, the reader's view is from below, and we are looking up at V's face, giving him an appearance of gazing upward to the heavens. This is V at his most idealistic, his faith that after his contribution, a better world will be possible. I like this, this move to talk about the panels directly and to closely analyze the panels. You definitely do a lot with dialogue, right? Because V for Vendetta gives us a number of quotable moments, as you have here. Anarchy wears two faces, both creator and destroyer. We have all of that, but I would sort of encourage you to do even more when you're dealing with visual culture, visual frame analysis, or panel analysis in this case. And you guys do a few times, but I think this paper could be strengthened by even more of that. Toward the end, you are doing it. The panels on page 194. I don't know who is responsible for those close readings of the panels, but even more of that could help to kind of balance out the heavy use of the dialogue in the graphic novel. But again, overall, the close readings are well established. Two other things that I would say about the paper, stylistically, what we're looking for, I think it's hard to establish this when you're writing with multiple writers, but we kind of want to smooth out the language in this paper a little. So at the end of the first paragraph, right after we get our argument sentence, a couple of sentences, you say, before we look into the characters in V for Vendetta, defining what a dystopia is ought to be first and foremost. So, I mean, even as I read that sort of feels a little chunky, clunky, and chunky and clunky. Feels a little clunky, a little less natural. And I think that those kinds of maneuvers, before we look into the characters, sort of phrasing things in that way takes us out of the text and disrupts your natural flow. I can see that you want to give a roadmap here in the paper, but let's see if I can find another example of just the tone of the paper. Yeah, like a little bit later, this is page 3, I think, where V for Vendetta swerves from the aforementioned definition of dystopia. Again, I guess you'd want to be less self-reflexive, less self-conscious in your writing style. You don't have to say, draw attention to the aforementioned definition. Just say, V for Vendetta departs from this definition of a dystopia because it's a critical dystopia. So these are just sort of stylistic suggestions that you don't necessarily have to use the we and back up from the work a little in the way that you do here. Because this sort of slows down your prose. The other stylistic point I would make, and again, this is a solid paper, but one of the things it tends to do is begin each paragraph with a sort of plot summary or descriptive sentence, as opposed to a topic sentence that's making an argument. So almost all the paragraphs, and not all, like that paragraph there that I just read about departing from the definition of dystopia is an example of a point or argument topic sentence. That's the kind of topic sentence you want. But one that is describing a scene, a paragraph that begins by describing a scene, doesn't help move your argument forward as clearly as a paragraph that is going to have the topic sentence / argument first. So I hope that makes sense, that it's a stronger flow and a stronger argumentative feel for your papers if you can begin all of your paragraphs with a sort of mini argument for that paragraph, and then in the body of the paragraph use your textual evidence. So really just some tweaking and reorganizing of the paragraph would help here. The final thought I have about the paper, the team paper on V, is that I'm kind of looking for that dynamic claim, where you push things even further. Because basically, the argument is that, this is seemingly just a dystopian text, but it's actually a critical dystopian text that has this element of hope, and V, encourages these changes in the other characters. All of that is true, and all of that is a little hard to argue against, right? That V encourages sort of a sense of radical transformation in other characters. That's all kind of true. Interesting to some extent, but not necessarily surprising. And so what I would say that you want to aim for in your final project, and this is kind of going to get me to transition to that, is something that gives us that wow factor, right? That's something that you set up as completely unexpected for your reader, for your viewer, for your listener. So we want to be able to do that. And this is a great, again, these are great scenes from The Walking Dead of the wow factor at work, right? We can do this in popular culture. We can definitely do this in our prose and in our academic works. We still want that little punch of, well, what was surprising here? Why is that surprising? Is there anything against the grain that we might not have considered that's a little bit of a reach, but that allows us to make a bolder kind of argument, a bolder kind of claim? So that's what this paper needs, is that extra punch, rhetorically, argumentatively. Okay. Presentations, you guys have been fantastic each time. Your class contributions as individuals and as a team, your presentations are great. Keep doing what you're doing. You don't have any more presentations for us, but you guys introduced transmedia for our class. Very capable, great slides. If I don't have your slides already, please make sure you email them to me, but I actually think that you did email me your slides. I can double check myself, but fantastic presentations, no doubt there. And it seems like, based on your team assessment, that you guys are getting along well and the division of labor is equitable. You're one of the best functioning teams. And I think that some of that has to do with the personalities in the group. You guys seem to have a great attitude overall. Even people who are in your team who are not gamers seem to be able to work with this game. So I want to commend you for picking a game that everyone in your team could play and relate to, even with differing skill levels. I almost said skills levels, but I want to commend you for picking the right game for your team, and for continuing to work together. It seems like you all are contributing well in your quizzes, and I will be emailing you probably today your team quiz grades and averages, but there really isn't anything that stands out in your team assessment other than good job, great job. Okay, so now I want to talk to you guys about your machinima, and I got to pull up my iPad here and look at the email that Caleb sent, which I wanted to get to sooner, and I did talk to your team about your project, and I like it. So Caleb's email, basically he asked a question of about, he says, well, you guys want to more or less argue that morality takes on a whole new meaning, and that the real issue is not, the real surprise of the game is not, it has nothing to do with Lee, it has more to do with, because Lee, as Caleb is writing here, and as you guys have expressed, you really only have the illusion of choice when you're working with Lee, because the outcomes are the same no matter what. That sounds right. So you say that, okay, it's more about the player's emotional journey and their morals as they're making these choices. And then, so all of that seems true. Guys, the only thing I would say is I would encourage you to see if we can push this even further. So yes, one of the things that you guys are pointing out is that, one of the things you guys have pointed out to me is that I think is interesting is that when you compare Lee to Rick in the comic and in the TV show, you really do have some sort of contrasting experiences, right? You have the illusion of control with him, and you don't necessarily have control in the other works with Rick, but Lee is kind of, you create his morality, so he has this sort of flexible sense of morality, which to some extent I guess you could argue that Rick does, but certainly Lee's sort of relationship to the law is very different than Rick's was. That was sort of a surprising argument, right? That you play a kind of future or ex-con in a way, but I don't know that. I think that I think this is this Telltale, the developer? I think they wanted it to be about this illusion of choice, right? That it's actually not that surprising that the game comes down to the moral choices and moral decisions that a player makes. So I guess, I'm curious to see how this plays out in your machinima project, and I definitely am curious to talk to you more about because Calibrites, you're planning on doing a video presentation where you show scenes and have a sort of mock argument going on about the different moral choices that you can take in the game. Where one person is playing by the rules of a pre-dystopian society, and one person is playing by the rules of a dystopian society, so I guess, you know, making Lee a jerk. That all sounds fine. I just want to stress that your machinima project should be a machinima project. I don't want you to have isolated scenes from the game that you're like presenting in class. Everything that you do for the final project should appear in video format. So it should appear as scenes, you know, from the game, like I have here, with voiceover. We talked about you trying to do split screens, which I think you can do in iMovie. You might have to do that in another piece of software like Final Cut or a Windows Movie Maker, where if you had split screens, you could show player 1 and player 2 making different decisions, and then you could actually, on top of that, have a voiceover. I would be interested in that format because I think that allows you to make these points visual. Oops, ran out of video footage there, guys. So yeah, you want it to be self-contained. You don't want to do an in-class presentation where you're explaining different scenes. So you want it to be a walkthrough or machinima project that has this critical edge. So let's talk more in class or after class about your argument piece of your project. Because I do want you all, I know Team Om Nom is capable of doing this. I want you guys to push it to the next level from an argumentative standpoint. So that might mean that you're stylistically achieving that by having these split screens and these different player experiences and making some like larger meta commentary about the player experience in this universe. It might mean that you're engaging these theories of dystopia in one way or another and saying, okay, so let's ask some questions of, you know, what's the point of playing this game? Is it to be surprised? Is it to be comforted by the choices that you made that gelled with the choices that other people made, for example? Can we say something unexpected about this experience? And I do think you guys are onto something by talking about the emotions of the players. Maybe what you can do is splice together some of the other walkthroughs out there and your own reactions and your team and a couple of like mashups of those other emotional reactions, those reaction videos of people playing, if what you want to focus on is like morality and emotions and the combination of those two things. So I just, you know, we'll talk more Team Om Nom, but I definitely want to see you guys say something that, you know, maybe is outside of the box of what even the developers predicted. Because I do think that Telltale is deliberately making a game that is more about player experience here, you know, than it is about real choice and etc. I mean, that's the way it seems to be, right? And that's why they are comparing at the end what those stats look like, you know, your decisions versus other people's decisions. Oh yeah, this is the end part of episode 3. Exciting times. Okay, so yeah, Team Om Nom, excellent work so far. Let's see where you guys go in this final turn of events. Congratulations on being a team that worked together well, that showed up for the task of working together as a team, and I'll see you soon.
We gotta jump.
What? No way!
Guys! Come on!
Jump!
No!
Jump, damn it!
Still no!
Fine.